If not, we'll move to our next agenda item, and that is a report on the Office of Federal Relations in Washington. Vice Chancellor Shute.
Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the board, Chancellor, thank you very much for this opportunity to give you a brief overview of the Office of Federal Relations in this, our 10th year of operations. Back in the mid to late 90s, the board at that time was presented with a study by the RAND Corporation, which showed that Texas as a state was woefully behind other states in attracting federal R&D. The board took that to heart, and they realized that if Texas was going to improve its lot, the UT system was going to be the lead dog in that hunt. They also recognized at that time that to be extremely effective in that, we need to have a footprint inside the Beltway in Washington, and hence created the Office of Federal Relations in 1999. Now, we have three primary missions: the analysis of federal legislation and policies, the pursuit of federal research, and managing the Archer Fellowship Program. I will touch on each of these briefly. Feel free to ask any questions as I go along the way. We do this among each of these missions primarily by coordinating with system administration here in Austin, with the administration and researchers on each of the campuses, and coordinating Washington meetings where it's appropriate to get those two bodies together, either with Congress, the agencies, or the administration. And we also manage the federal lobby disclosure requirements for the entire system, which is a growing burden on each of the campuses as they continue to increase their interaction with Washington. An essential part of being a remote outpost, such as the Office of Federal Relations, is communication. We try many ways to communicate with the campuses, with system administration, either online via a regular Washington update that's produced in the office, or more importantly, direct contact with the campus offices, with the researchers that we know are involved in particular areas of opportunity in Washington. Campus visits back in the state play such an important role in that, because email and phone calls only go so far. It's when we're back on the campuses seeing the work that's come from the investment you've made in their research facilities really adds value to the representation we have in Washington. On the policy standpoint, while most of higher ed policy and our operations are governed here at the state level, the federal government does have a small but direct impact, particularly on the health institution side, as you can well imagine. We work with each of the campuses in that regard to help make sure that their interaction with the federal government is such that our policymakers and decision makers know about the impact of what they're proposing and the positive value that we can bring in terms of providing data, expert witnesses, anything else that they would find of value from the great work being done here. This is just a small example of the type of issues that we do follow on a regular basis. Dr. Shine gave you a very good update on the healthcare reform process in Washington. If you have any further questions, I will be here for a while, and I'm pleased to have with me my Assistant Vice Chancellor for Federal Relations, Angela Godbee, who works with the health institutions and tracks these issues in Washington as well. Now, as we know, as opposed to the past or the first 8 years of this decade, Texans are a bit out of favor in Washington at the moment. We've seen this before. We will certainly rise again like the phoenix out of the ashes, but know that our job continues to be supported by key people within all of the agencies and a very supportive congressional delegation. We have a number of people who are in key positions who are not only Texans, but are alumni of our campus and are very fond and very proud to be working with each of the campuses as they come to town and interact. On the research side, we view this as our prime directive. After all, as I mentioned, this was the main reason why the office was established in 1999. We're looking for opportunities constantly for our campus researchers. We scour the agency budgets. We look for grant announcements. We try to get those communications to the campuses as quickly as possible to give our campus researchers a leg up in the process. But more importantly, we want to get them immersed in the process by bringing them to town, getting to know the program managers in the areas in which they work, bringing the program managers back to the campuses, such as in a grants conference that we recently did at UT Dallas, with the NIH, in which about a dozen of their program managers came to UT Dallas, talked to about 300 of our researchers, and said things like, here's where the money is, and more importantly, here's what a successful application looks like. We also analyzed legislation and looked for opportunities in that regard, most recent example being the Recovery Act, and I'll touch on that in just a minute. And then we also have an appropriations process where we work with the campuses on projects that they can submit through that process in Congress, and I'll touch on that in just a sec. As Vice Chancellor McDowell mentioned, the research portfolio for the UT system is very strong and growing. This slide shows you the importance of the federal investment in research to not only our campuses but to the state overall. They are the #1 source of basic academic research in the United States. And it's absolutely critical that our campuses continue to increase their participation at the federal level for that reason alone. Within the state of Texas and within our campuses, the three major sponsors of research are the National Institutes of Health, #1 with a bullet representing about 69% of the investment in federal research in the state of Texas, followed by the Department of Defense and the National Science Foundation. We view opportunities within all three of those agencies, but as a most critical objective for my office is looking at those agencies of which we think we could do better. NSF is certainly one. Department of Energy, I think, has to be at the top of that list. And we're making efforts to increase the participation within that agency as we speak. This just gives you an example of the growth trend. System overall at the top, health institutions in the middle, academic campuses at the bottom. Clearly, the Regents' foresight in the 90s has proved to be true. We are going to be the lead dogs in increasing that share of federal research and development here in Texas. Our goal over that period has been to assist the campuses not only with the productive work that their internal organizations already have in place, but try to sniff out alternative sources that they may not be thinking of, or to try to expand upon the opportunities that they want to take as they grow towards Tier 1 status or just increasing their research portfolio. I mentioned the Recovery Act. Clearly, this is on everyone's mind still. It was a very unique source of federal research dollars. It's proven to be a unique opportunity for many universities around the country. We had a role early on in the process during the legislation creating the Recovery Act funding opportunities in working with our higher education associations in Washington, working directly with system administration and the campuses in terms of promoting shovel-ready projects, but also making sure that bad legislation didn't happen. I have the Coburn Amendment listed up there because at one point Senator Coburn of Oklahoma had a proposal to prohibit any universities with endowments of X amount from participating in Recovery Act funding. Fortunately, we were not alone in recognizing that that was a bad idea, and we're able to beat that one back. We also work closely with Barry McBee's operation in terms of getting a good understanding of what the State Stabilization Fund would mean for Texas and how that would be implemented through the governor's office. This is just an example of some of the material that my office produced to impart to the campuses what opportunities were coming out of the Recovery Act. It's a very busy slide, but just wanted to give you an example of the type of information we were providing at that time. This chart is an example of how we're doing so far in terms of attracting Recovery Act grants. And this is just a snapshot of where our campuses were in terms of National Science Foundation Recovery Act grants as of last month. I'm happy to say that in the time since this was prepared, the number of awards and the dollar amounts from NSF have just about doubled for our campuses. But more importantly, this just gives you an example of how we're comparing to other campuses around the country. Only listed here are those schools or systems of which received at least 20 awards from the National Science Foundation. NIH, we've been doing very well. As Dr. Shine mentioned yesterday, over $136 million in Recovery Act funds have gone to our campuses from NIH. And if you look across all agencies, right now we stand at just over 500 total awards, totaling $186 million plus. Those announcements are just now being made, so we expect those numbers to increase as the months come. And then the third piece of what we do on the research front is congressionally directed or congressionally supported research, better known as earmarks. Earmarks have had somewhat of a bad name over the past, but let me tell you, they've been an important source of funds for our campuses. They do represent less than 10% of the total research portfolio. So our campuses recognize that this is the low-hanging fruit. These opportunities are out there because we have a very supportive delegation in Congress, and they want to help the campuses in their research endeavors. This is a direct way in which they can do that. Now, on the flip side, our campuses recognize that this is not a stable way to build a research portfolio, but take those opportunities, apply them to areas in which a young researcher is just getting started, or perhaps a particular field of research where there's some expertise, but a federal agency is not devoting enough resources towards that. This is the process that we established about 8 years ago when I started this job, and have implemented an ongoing review and submission process with the campuses. And fortunately, very proud to say that during that period have attracted over $647 million through the earmark process alone. But it does go, as this chart illustrates, it's a year-to-year gamble. It takes a lot of hard work. Atmospherics, like the overall pressure on the federal budget, come into play every year, so it can't really be relied upon. It all comes back to agency grants, and it's our challenge to look for new ways to build upon those successes our campuses are having with the federal agency, and we look for any suggestions that Keith's office has and that the individual vice presidents of research have on the campuses. I could keep you here all afternoon talking about the projects that my office has been associated with on the campuses, but here are some of the prime examples of things of which I take personal pride in because of the great work my staff has done. Things like the Nano Fab facility at UT Arlington have received federal support, the International Trade Center at Brownsville, the Galveston National Lab, the great work of Ray Baum at UT Dallas and how he has taken his work on nanoparticles and been able to turn them into artificial muscles or flexible television video displays for fabric use. And Joe McCormick, who Dr. Shine mentioned earlier this morning, and his great work on health disparities in Cameron County have received some federal support. And then finally, in conclusion, very proud of the work that we do with the Archer program in our office. This is an undergraduate fellowship program involving all 9 academic campuses, from which now 36 students come each semester, live in Washington in a group environment, find and with our assistance attract a 40-hour-a-week fellowship at either some federal agency, an embassy, working for CNN, something that takes advantage of their career pursuit, their dreams, their degree pursuit, and at the end of that busy day, twice, sometimes 3 times a week, come to our office in our conference room and take a 12-hour course load. These are bright individuals. These are the future leaders of our state and our country. I have one anecdote I have to share with you. Many of you have heard this before, I know, but for those who haven't, I think it goes to the heart of what this program is about. Many years ago, we had a young man from UTEP who was a Mexican national studying finance, international politics at UTEP, got into the Archer program, landed himself an internship at the World Bank right across the street from our office, and within 1 month of being there had convinced his supervisor to print business cards that said, Arturo Barrios, consultant to the World Bank. Now, he's gone on to work for the Minister of Interior in Mexico. He's done North American border relations for President Fox. I think we'll see this young man time and time again as things go on in his career. But that's just one example. We've had students who've gone through this program who've ended up at UT Southwestern Medical, have gone at Columbia Law, have been at Oxford, have been at Cambridge, have volunteered their times in their communities, have done grassroots political support, and time again, they point to their experience in the Archer program as being somewhat of an inspiration to them. I know I'm bragging on it, but it's something I'm very proud about because we have an opportunity here to grow this program. We're already working with Dr. Pryor's office and Dr. Studer in particular on implementing a graduate level aspect to this. We had a pilot program with UT Dallas last summer in political science. They were turning people away to come do that. We're expanding that program this summer. We've also reached out to UT Austin to begin a similar program. The Provost's office has been very enthusiastic about that. We will have UT Austin graduate students this summer. We're working with UT Law. We expect, if not this summer, that the next summer that we'll have a UT Law component to this. And the next step down that road is working with Dr. Shine's operation to find an appropriate way to get our future healthcare providers immersed into a similar environment. It's obviously its own challenges because of the educational process in the medical schools, but I am thoroughly convinced that as we're seeing right now with the healthcare debate, that our future healthcare providers are only starting to get a real appreciation of the impact the federal government is going to have on their careers and of their provision of healthcare to all of us. And we need to get them more educated and more immersed in the process so they can be better participants in it. And with that comment, this comment by Kate Lummis, who is one of our proud alumni of the program, I say thank you again for your time and happy to answer any other questions about OFR.
For those of you who don't know about the Archer Center, of course we don't have time today, but to spend some time with you learning about it, it's an exceptional opportunity for whatever level of student comes there.
Agreed.
Regent Hicks.
I have one question. I remember during the orientation that we were significantly outmanned in our Washington presence by the state of California a year ago. Has that changed at all with their budgetary problems?
They've lost a couple of individuals, but they haven't lost the slots. And they have no reason to downsize their operation because as budget pressures at the state levels continue on universities across the country and corporate philanthropy has dropped because of the economic situation, the federal government remains a very important target. Plus, they still have their national lab management issues, and they have people on the ground there to deal with that. They've made a substantial investment in a facility in Washington. They have a very nice building in which they house about 300 students a semester for their fellowship program. So we have building envy in that regard, but they have made a major investment, and they'll continue to do so. Beyond us, there's a significant drop-off in Washington participation. Most universities in the country do not have a Washington presence. Those that do, it tends to be one or two people. The rest fly them in and rely on the trade associations.
Other questions or comments? The final